Liam Vance looked at the crisp, cream-colored envelope resting on the polished marble of their kitchen island. It lay there like a verdict. He didn't need to open it to know its contents. The name of the prestigious law firm embossed in the corner, the same firm his father-in-law used for all his merciless corporate takeovers, was enough. He knew this moment was coming. He had in fact been counting on it. Clara, his wife of 8 years, glided into the kitchen, a vision in a silk robe that probably cost more than his first car. She didn't look at him. She never really looked at him anymore, only through him, as if he were a ghost haunting the opulent rooms she considered solely her own. Her eyes, cool and assessing, were fixed on the envelope. A small, triumphant smile played on her lips. "I see you found it," she said, her voice smooth and chilled, like river stones. She picked up her smoothie, a vibrant green concoction of kale and condescension. "My lawyer said they would be delivered this morning. I thought it best we handle this quickly, civilly." Liam remained silent, his hands resting on the cool back of a dining chair. The chair, like everything else in the house, was her choice. It was aggressively modern, uncomfortable, and designed to be looked at, not lived in. A perfect metaphor for their marriage. Clara took a delicate sip of her drink. "It's for the best, Liam. You must see that. We've grown apart. We want different things." He finally met her gaze. His own eyes, which she once called kind and full of depth, were now just tired. Or so she thought. "Different things," he repeated, the words flat. "And what is it you want, Clara?" She laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. It was the laugh of a victor. "Don't be obtuse. It's not about what I want, it's about what's fair. A clean break, an equitable division of assets. My father has been very clear on the legal precedents." She gestured vaguely with her free hand, a diamond bracelet sliding down her wrist. "Half, Liam. That's the law. Half of everything, including, of course, your recent windfall." There it was, the heart of the matter, laid bare on the cold, sterile surface of their million-dollar kitchen. The $500 million, the lottery win that had for the past 2 months been the unspoken third party in their marriage. She thought it was his. She thought she was divorcing a multimillionaire, securing her future, and shedding the dead weight of a husband she had long since come to despise. She thought this was her masterstroke. What Clara didn't know, what she had never bothered to ask in her whirlwind of avarice and contempt, was a simple, devastating truth. The winning ticket, the colossal fortune that had her planning a life of unrestrained luxury, was never his. He had purchased it, yes, but he had done so for his mother, Eleanor, as a small gift for her 65th birthday. The prize was claimed in her name. The bank accounts, the trusts, the entire staggering sum, it all belonged to a quiet, retired librarian who lived in a modest bungalow 300 miles away. Within 3 weeks, Clara's world, built on a foundation of arrogant assumption, would be reduced to rubble. And Liam, the man she saw as a weak, pathetic failure, would be the one holding the architect's plans. He looked at the divorce papers, then back at his wife's smug, confident face, and felt a profound, aching stillness settle over him. The storm was here, and he was ready. We know stories like this can bring up a lot of emotions. It's a situation that feels both fantastical and deeply, painfully real. We're so glad you're here to go on this journey with us. Before we dive into how it all began, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoy seeing arrogance meet its match, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. You won't want to miss how this unfolds. The rot had set in long before the lottery ticket. It had started subtly, a creeping frost at the edges of their life together, which began to advance with chilling speed the day Liam lost his job. He had been a senior architect at a respected firm, a job he loved, a career he had built with passion and precision. But a sudden economic downturn had led to a brutal round of layoffs, and his position, despite his talent, was eliminated. The first true sign of the deep structural decay in his marriage came at a Sunday dinner a week later. The setting was, as always, his in-laws' palatial home. The dining room was a cavern of mahogany and crystal, presided over by Clara's father, Marcus Thorne, a man who measured the world in stock prices and market share. Her mother, Diana, was a porcelain doll of a woman, her face a smooth, placid mask that betrayed nothing but a lifetime of agreeing with her husband. Liam felt his suit, once a source of professional pride, suddenly feel cheap and ill-fitting under Marcus's dismissive gaze. The older man swirled the wine in his glass, a deep, blood-red Bordeaux. "Clara tells me your firm had some restructuring," Marcus began, the word restructuring delivered with the same distaste one might use for infestation. "I was laid off, Marcus," Liam said, keeping his voice even. There was no shame in it, but he knew Marcus would invent some. "Laid off," Marcus repeated, tasting the word and finding it wanting. "In my day, good men weren't laid off. They were indispensable. They made themselves indispensable." He took a long, slow sip of wine, his eyes pinning Liam to his chair. "So, what's the plan? You can't expect to maintain this lifestyle on, well, on nothing. My daughter has certain expectations. She's accustomed to a certain standard." Liam felt Clara's presence beside him, a block of ice. She didn't defend him. She didn't offer a word of support. She simply rearranged the silverware on her plate, the tiny metallic click echoing the vast, silent space that had opened between them. Her silence was an endorsement of her father's words. It was an act of profound betrayal, and it cut Liam more deeply than any of Marcus's verbal blows. "I'm an architect," Liam said, his voice quiet but firm. "A good one. I'm already sending out my portfolio to other firms. It's a temporary setback." Marcus let out a short, derisive huff. "Temporary? In this economy? The market is contracting, Liam. Only the strong survive. You need to be aggressive, proactive. Sitting around waiting for calls isn't a strategy." He then turned his attention to his daughter, his tone softening, becoming proprietary. "Don't you worry, sweetheart. Your father will always take care of you. We'll make sure you're insulated." The implication was clear. Liam was a liability, a failing stock to be mitigated. Clara offered a small, grateful smile to her father, a smile that didn't touch her eyes, and certainly didn't reach across the table to her husband. In that moment, Liam understood. He wasn't her partner, he was an accessory, and now a tarnished one. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket, his fingers brushing against a small, folded piece of paper. It was the lottery ticket he'd bought for his mother the day before. He'd picked it up on a whim at a corner store, a little what if to tuck into her birthday card. At the time, it was just a silly, hopeful gesture. But now, sitting at that oppressive table, enduring the slow-motion demolition of his worth, his fingers closed around it. The flimsy paper felt like a secret strength, a hidden blueprint for a different future. He didn't know it was the winner yet. He wouldn't know for another 3 days. But in that moment of profound humiliation, as his wife and her father discussed his failure as if he weren't even there, the simple act of holding that ticket felt like an act of quiet rebellion. It was a promise he made to himself. He would not be defined by their narrow, cruel accounting of his value. He was the architect of his own life, and he would not let them tear it down. The numbers were drawn on a Tuesday night. Liam was in his home office, a small, meticulously organized space that was his only real sanctuary in the house. He was polishing his portfolio, refining his resume, ignoring the faint sounds of a reality TV show Clara was watching in the living room. On a whim, he remembered the ticket and pulled up the lottery website. He checked the numbers once, twice, a third time. His heart didn't pound. There was no shout of disbelief. Instead, a deep, profound calm washed over him. It was the same feeling he got when a complex design finally clicked into place, when all the lines and angles resolved into a perfect, harmonious whole. $500 million. The numbers on the screen seemed to hum with silent, tectonic power. He walked out of the study. Clara was on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, the television chattering ignored in the background. "Clara," he said, his voice steady. She answered, not looking up. "The lottery ticket I bought for my mom. It won." Her head snapped up. Her eyes, usually so distant, were suddenly sharp, focused, predatory. "What? What did you say?" "It won," he repeated. "The grand prize." She was off the sofa in a flash, her phone clattering to the floor. "You're kidding. You're joking." She searched his face, looking not for joy, but for the lie. When she saw none, her expression transformed. A slow, greedy smile spread across her face. Oh my God, Liam, we won! We actually won!" She threw her arms around him, a gesture so foreign and startling it took him a moment to react. It wasn't an embrace of shared joy. It felt possessive, like she was staking a claim. "How much?" she whispered, her voice conspiratorial, excited. "How much is it?" 500 million, he said. Her gasp was sharp, intoxicating. She pulled back, her hands on his shoulders, her eyes dancing with frantic calculations. 500 million? She breathed. The number was an incantation. He could almost see the world it conjured for her taking shape behind her eyes. The yachts, the couture, the envy of her friends, the ultimate validation in her father's eyes. And in that moment, watching her, Liam made a decision. It was a decision born of the cold silence at her father's dinner table, of the countless small dismissals, of the gaping void where their partnership used to be. "Yes," he said, "we won." He didn't correct her. He let her believe the we. He let her believe the money was theirs to share. He knew, with the chilling certainty of a man who has finally seen the truth, that this colossal fortune would not be a bridge to reconnect them. It would be a crucible. It would be the ultimate test of her character, a test he already knew she would fail. The lie was a seed, planted in the fertile ground of her greed, and he would stand back and watch what grew. The 2 months that followed were a masterclass in unrestrained avarice. Clara, who had once chided Liam for buying a hardcover book instead of waiting for the paperback, now spent money with a kind of religious fervor. The Lottery Commission had advised a period of quiet planning before the official claim, a window of time to assemble a legal and financial team. For Liam, it was a time of careful, strategic action. For Clara, it was a starter pistol for a marathon of spending. She quit her job in marketing, a job she'd always complained about, but which had given her a sense of purpose, with a dramatic email to her entire department, vaguely alluding to a new and exciting chapter that no longer required her to suffer the indignity of a 9-to-5 existence. Then came the purchases. First, a new car. Not for him, but for her. A crimson convertible sports car that she parked defiantly in the driveway, a gleaming testament to their new status. "We have to look the part, darling," she'd said when he'd questioned the wisdom of such a large purchase before the funds were even accessible. "Image is everything." Her wardrobe underwent a complete overhaul. Delivery boxes from high-end designers arrived daily, a cardboard tide that filled their minimalist foyer. She paraded her new outfits for him, not seeking his approval, but demanding his admiration. She was dressing for a new life, a life in which he was becoming an increasingly blurry figure in the background. Liam watched it all with a quiet, unnerving calm. He didn't argue. He didn't protest. He simply made a note of every expenditure. While Clara was on the phone with personal shoppers, Liam was on the phone with his mother, Eleanor, and a team of carefully vetted professionals, a shrewd estate lawyer and a conservative, methodical financial advisor named Mr. Harrison. "The claim has been filed and verified, Eleanor," Liam said one afternoon, speaking softly from his study. Everything is in your name. The initial funds will be transferred to the holding corporation we establish by next Friday." On the other end of the line, his mother's voice was warm, but laced with concern. "Liam, are you sure about this? About letting Clara believe it's yours? It feels deceptive." Eleanor Vance was a woman of quiet strength and unshakable integrity. A retired librarian, she found more value in the well-turned phrase of a classic novel than in any bank statement. The sheer scale of the money was, for her, more of a burden than a blessing. "It's not a deception, Mom. It's a clarification," Liam replied, staring out the window at Clara's garish new car. "She is showing me exactly who she is. I need to see it through. I need to know for sure." "And what will you do with all this absurdity?" Eleanor asked. "We will," Liam corrected her gently. "And we will do good with it. The foundation plans are already being drawn up. The Vance Foundation, for architectural preservation and sustainable community housing. Your name, your legacy." He could almost hear his mother's quiet smile over the phone. That was the part of this that felt real to him, the creation, the building of something meaningful. Meanwhile, Clara's contempt for him grew in direct proportion to her spending. His job search, once a source of tension, was now a subject of open mockery. "Honestly, Liam, why are you still bothering with that?" she asked one evening, waving a dismissive hand at his laptop, where several architectural job sites were open. "It's embarrassing. People will think we need the money." "I'm an architect, Clara. It's who I am. It's what I do," he said simply. "It's what you did," she corrected, her voice sharp. "You need to think bigger now. You're not some draftsman anymore. You're a player. My father says we should be looking at investments, at leveraging this. He says he can guide you." The idea of Marcus Thorne guiding him with his money was both laughable and infuriating. Liam knew Marcus would simply use the fortune as a new weapon in his corporate arsenal, with Liam as the hapless puppet. "I have it under control," Liam said, his tone leaving no room for discussion. Clara scoffed. "You? Liam, you managed to get yourself fired. Forgive me if I don't have complete faith in your financial acumen. This is the big leagues now. You're out of your depth." She walked away, leaving him in the silence of his study. He looked at the screen, at the elegant lines of a building he had once designed, and felt a pang of loss, not for his job, but for the man he had been, the man who had believed in their shared future. That man was gone. In his place was someone quieter, more patient, and infinitely more resolute. Clara thought he was out of his depth. She had no idea he was the one who had designed the entire ocean. He closed the laptop. The secret preparations were nearly complete. All that was left was for her to make the final, predictable move. And he wouldn't have to wait long. The night before the mediation was unnervingly still. The house, usually filled with the low hum of Clara's television shows or the staccato clicks of her heels on the hardwood floors, was shrouded in a heavy, expectant silence. It was the quiet of a battlefield before the first charge, a space thick with unspoken hostilities and foregone conclusions. Clara was in the master bedroom, a room that had long since become hers alone. Liam had been sleeping in the guest room for months, a physical manifestation of their emotional distance. He could hear the low murmur of her voice as she spoke on the phone. He didn't need to press his ear to the door to know who she was talking to. It was either her father or her lawyer. The tone was the same for both. Confident, conspiratorial, triumphant. "No, Davies, he won't put up a fight," she was saying, her voice carrying clearly into the hallway. "He doesn't have it in him. He'll just roll over. Yes, of course, the house is non-negotiable. And the alimony is for my career prospects, which I had to sacrifice. A fresh start. Exactly." There was a pause, and then she laughed, a sound that was both brittle and cruel. "Don't worry, by this time tomorrow he'll be a very rich, very sad memory." Liam stood in the hallway, motionless. He didn't feel anger. He didn't feel hurt. He felt a strange and profound sense of detachment, as if he were an observer in his own life, watching the final act of a play whose ending he had already written. Her words were not a betrayal. They were simply a confirmation of the data he had been collecting for years. He retreated to his study. The room was his fortress of solitude, the one space that bore his mark. Books on structural engineering and architectural theory lined the walls. Blueprints for past projects were neatly rolled and stored. On his desk, a single, elegant leather briefcase sat open. He wasn't packing clothes or personal effects. He was curating an exhibition of their failure. Methodically, he began to place documents into the briefcase. First, a detailed spreadsheet he had meticulously maintained for the past 2 months. It listed every one of Clara's extravagant purchases, from the crimson sports car to the last pair of $1,000 shoes, complete with dates, amounts, and store names. Next, he added the bank statements for their joint account, showing a dizzying outflow of funds, all initiated by her. He then placed a thin file in the briefcase. It contained printed copies of emails and text messages. A message from Clara to her best friend. Finally cashing in my ticket out of this boring marriage. Can't wait for St. Bart's. An email from Marcus to Clara. Davies will ensure you get the maximum possible. He's a shark. Your husband won't know what hit him. He had found them not by snooping, but because she had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter, utterly careless in her arrogance, so sure of his weakness that she never even considered he might be watching. Finally, he placed one more folder at the very top. It was slim, containing only a few pages. One was a copy of his mother's birthday card, the one in which he'd tucked the ticket, with the handwritten note, "Happy 65th, Mom. Here's to a lucky year. Love, Liam." The other was a notarized affidavit, signed by both him and the clerk at the corner store, attesting to the fact that he had explicitly stated the ticket was a gift for his mother at the time of purchase. And on top of that, a copy of the official lottery claim form, bearing the unmistakable, elegant signature of Eleanor Vance. He closed the briefcase. The snap of the latches was loud and final in the silent house. It felt like closing a book, or perhaps closing a tomb. He looked around the study at the models of buildings he had designed, structures built on principles of integrity, balance, and strength. He had applied those same principles to this situation. He had built his case with the same care and precision he would use to design a skyscraper. It was sound, it was stable, and it was about to withstand the storm of a lifetime. Clara thought tomorrow was about an ending. She had no idea it was about a reckoning. The mediation room was designed to project an aura of expensive, intimidating neutrality. A long, polished mahogany table reflected the cold, recessed lighting from above. The chairs were black leather, high-backed and imposing. On one side of the table sat Clara, flanked by her father, Marcus, and their lawyer, a man named Arthur Davies. Davies was in his late 50s, with a mane of silver hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He radiated an air of smug, reptilian competence. Marcus Thorne sat like a king holding court, his hands clasped over a belly softened by years of expensive meals and easy victories. He looked at Liam with open contempt. And Clara looked radiant. She wore a cream-colored dress that screamed quiet luxury, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She was the very picture of a wronged wife about to receive her just rewards, a role she had clearly rehearsed. She offered Liam a small, pitying smile as he entered, as if he were a lamb arriving for his own shearing. Liam entered alone. He had declined to bring his lawyer for this initial meeting, a strategic choice Davies had interpreted as weakness. Liam wore a simple, dark gray suit. It wasn't flashy, but it was perfectly tailored, and he wore it with an air of quiet confidence that seemed to subtly irritate Marcus. He placed his leather briefcase on the floor beside his chair and sat down, his posture relaxed, his hands resting calmly on the table. Davies cleared his throat, shuffling a thick stack of papers. "Well, Liam," he began, his tone a slick blend of patronage and impatience. "Glad you could make it. We'd like to resolve this as amicably and efficiently as possible, for Clara's sake." Liam simply nodded, his expression unreadable. "So let's get to it," Davies continued, leaning forward. "We've drawn up a preliminary proposal based on a full and transparent disclosure of assets. As you know, under state law, all marital assets are subject to a 50-50 division. This, of course, includes the $500 million lottery prize." He slid a document across the table. "We are proposing that $250 million, the post-tax equivalent of your 50% share, be transferred to a trust for Mrs. Vance. Furthermore, she will retain ownership of the marital home, its contents, and the vehicles. We are also proposing a monthly alimony payment of $50,000 for a period of 10 years to compensate for the career opportunities she has foregone to support your—" he paused for effect, "endeavors." Marcus grunted his approval. Clara watched Liam, a small, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She was waiting for him to break, to argue, to plead, to show some sign of the pathetic weakness she so despised. Liam didn't even look at the document in front of him. He kept his eyes on Davies, his gaze steady, the silence stretched. It was a power play, and Liam was refusing to play his assigned part. Finally, he spoke. His voice was not loud, but it filled the room with an unexpected authority. "That's a very comprehensive proposal, Arthur," he said, using the lawyer's first name with a familiarity that made the man blink. "It's meticulously detailed, but it seems to be predicated on one rather significant assumption." Davies frowned. "And what assumption might that be?" Liam leaned forward slightly, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the aggressive posture of the men opposite him. He asked a simple question, a question that was not a plea for information, but a perfectly aimed stone at the foundation of their entire case. "On what legal basis," Liam asked, his voice soft yet piercing, "are you classifying the lottery winnings as a marital asset?" Davies almost laughed. "On the basis that you won it during the marriage, of course. It's boilerplate, Liam. Community Property 101. Don't waste our time with frivolous questions." "It would be community property," Liam agreed, his voice still unnervingly calm, "if I had won it." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "But I didn't." He reached down and lifted his briefcase onto the table. The clicks of the latches opening were like the cocking of a gun. He did not pull out spreadsheets or text messages. Not yet. He removed a single, slim folder and slid it across the mahogany expanse. It stopped directly in front of Arthur Davies. "I believe," Liam said, his voice dropping to an almost confidential whisper, "that you'll find the situation is slightly more complex than you've assumed." Arthur Davies stared at the folder, then at Liam, a flicker of uncertainty finally crossing his reptilian features. Marcus leaned forward, his brow furrowed in irritation. Clara's triumphant smile faltered, replaced by a look of confusion. The balance of power in the room had not yet shifted, but for the first time, a tremor ran through it. The air grew thick with a new, sharper tension. The quiet man they had also profoundly underestimated was about to speak, and they suddenly had the distinct and unsettling feeling that they were not prepared for what he was about to say. Davies opened the folder with a dismissive flick of his wrist, an affectation of control that failed to conceal a newfound flicker of professional curiosity. Inside, there were only a few pages. He picked up the top one. His eyes scanned the document, his smug expression slowly dissolving. It was a copy of the official state lottery claim form. He read the name of the claimant. He read it again. He looked up at Liam, his mouth slightly agape. The shark, for the first time, looked like a fish that had just been hooked. "What is it, Arthur?" Marcus demanded, his voice a low growl of impatience. Davies didn't answer. He was staring at the signature on the form, a neat, elegant cursive. Eleanor Vance. Liam leaned back in his chair, a silent observer to the chaos he had just unleashed. He decided to help them along. "As you can see," he said, his voice a model of calm reason, "the prize was claimed by the ticket's legal owner, my mother, Eleanor Vance." Clara shot out of her chair. "What? That's impossible. You're lying." Liam's gaze shifted to her. It was cold, clear, and utterly devoid of the affection she had taken for granted for so long. "Am I, Clara? Think back. Did I ever say I won? Or did I say the ticket won? You heard what you wanted to hear. You saw what you wanted to see. You never once asked about the details. You were too busy spending the money." "This is a trick," Marcus boomed, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "A fraudulent conveyance. You're trying to hide marital assets. We'll have you in court for years." Liam didn't flinch. He reached into his briefcase again and retrieved another document. It was the notarized affidavit from the convenience store clerk. He slid it across the table. "My mother's 65th birthday was on April 12th, Liam stated. The facts delivered like perfectly placed rivets in a steel frame. "I purchased the ticket for her on April 10th as a small gift. I even wrote a note in her birthday card to that effect, a copy of which is also in that folder. Mr. Henderson, the clerk who sold me the ticket, is prepared to testify that I mentioned it was a birthday present for my mom at the time of purchase. It was never my property. It was a gift from the moment of its purchase. It belonged to her. The winnings belonged to her." He paused, letting the legal and financial implications crash down upon them. "Therefore, the winnings are not, and have never been, a marital asset." The quiet bomb had detonated. The silence that followed was deafening, filled with the ringing of shattered expectations. Clara sank back into her chair, her face pale. The cream-colored dress, which had seemed so triumphant moments before, now looked like a costume for a part she could no longer play. "No," she whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. "No, no, no." Davies, scrambling to recover, flipped through the documents, his legal mind racing, searching for a loophole, an angle, an attack. This is highly irregular. The intent is perfectly clear," Liam said, cutting him off with surgical precision. "The intent was to give my mother a birthday present. The fact that it turned out to be an extraordinarily valuable one doesn't change the nature of the transaction. The only irregular behavior here has been my wife's presumption that my mother's good fortune was hers to spend." And then he turned his full attention to Clara. The moment for the moral mirror had arrived. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His quiet words were more devastating than any shout. "You wanted a partner who reflected your ambition, Clara. For a while I did. Then when I lost my job, all I reflected was your disdain. When you thought I was worth $500 million, you saw a reflection of the life you thought you deserved. But you were never looking at me. You were just looking at a mirror. And the money wasn't the prize. It was just a brighter light to show you what was really there." He then opened his briefcase fully, revealing the spreadsheet, the credit card statements, the text messages. "You accuse me of deception, but what do you call this? A list of every dollar you spent from a fortune you didn't have. Emails to your father about how to handle me. Texts to your friends about cashing in. Who exactly has been deceiving whom?" Just as Marcus stood up, ready to explode in a torrent of threats and fury, the door to the mediation room opened. Two women entered. The first was sharp, impeccably dressed, with the unmistakable air of a high-powered litigator. The second was a woman in her mid-60s, with kind eyes, a gentle face, and a spine made of absolute steel. "Arthur, Marcus," the lawyer said with a crisp nod. "I'm Sarah Albright. I represent Ms. Eleanor Vance." She gestured to the woman beside her. "And this is my client." Eleanor looked at Liam with quiet pride, then turned her calm, steady gaze upon Clara and her father. "I believe," she said, her voice gentle but unbreakable, You've been discussing my finances. The trap hadn't just been sprung. It had been elegantly, methodically, and completely sealed. The hunters were now the caged. The immediate aftermath was a symphony of sputtering rage and panicked disbelief. Marcus Thorne, a man accustomed to controlling every room he entered, found himself utterly silenced. He stared at Eleanor Vance, this quiet, unassuming woman who held all the cards, and then at his daughter, whose greed had led them into this cul-de-sac of humiliation. "You foolish girl," he finally hissed at Clara, his voice low and venomous, all pretense of paternal support stripped away. "You couldn't wait, could you? You had to jump the gun, show your hand, and for what? A car? Some dresses? You had a man who won the lottery, and you managed to lose everything." "He tricked me," Clara shrieked, her face contorted in a mask of pure fury. "He lied to me." "No," said Sarah Albright, her voice cutting through the hysteria with the clean authority of a judge's gavel. "He did not. My client's son allowed you to operate under your own set of assumptions. The law does not penalize a person for the avarice and presumption of others. In fact, your actions over the past 2 months," she gestured towards Liam's open briefcase, "which we have thoroughly documented, would be viewed by any court as evidence of extreme bad faith. Any claim you might have had to an amicable settlement has been thoroughly compromised by your own behavior." Davies, the silver-haired shark, looked pale and shaken. His multi-million-dollar payday had vanished, replaced by the specter of a professional embarrassment. He began packing his briefcase with clumsy, hurried movements. "This meeting is over," he mumbled. "We will be in touch." "I don't think you will," Ms. Albright replied coolly. "We, on the other hand, will be filing our own response to your divorce petition. Given that the primary marital asset you were banking on does not exist, and that most of the couple's remaining debts appear to be the result of Mrs. Vance's recent profligacy, we anticipate a swift and simple resolution. Liam will not be contesting the divorce. In fact, he welcomes it." The finality of her words hung in the air. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a declaration of terms. As Marcus and a sobbing Clara were ushered out of the room by a shell-shocked Arthur Davies, Eleanor walked over to her son. She placed a hand on his arm, her touch warm and grounding. "Are you all right?" she asked, her eyes searching his. Liam took a deep breath, the first truly easy breath he'd taken in years. He felt as though a tremendous weight had been lifted from his shoulders, a weight he hadn't even realized he was carrying. It wasn't just the weight of Clara's expectations or Marcus's contempt. It was the weight of pretending to be someone he wasn't, both the failure they saw and the millionaire she imagined. "I'm better than all right, Mom," he said, a genuine smile finally reaching his eyes. "I'm free." Later that evening, the scene shifted. The cold, sterile mediation office was replaced by the warm, book-lined living room of Eleanor's bungalow. The air smelled of old paper and brewing tea. Liam, Eleanor, and Sarah Albright sat around a small wooden coffee table, not as combatants, but as partners. On the table were not legal threats, but architectural drawings. Liam's phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with Clara's name. It was the 5th time she had tried to call in the last hour. The first call he had seen had been an angry, accusatory text. The subsequent ones were simply missed calls, each one more desperate than the last. He imagined her on the other end, her rage collapsing into panic as the reality of her situation set in. Stripped of the lottery money, stripped of her father's support, she was finally, truly, alone. He felt a brief, fleeting pang of something, not pity, but a sad, hollow ache for the woman he had once loved. The woman who had been completely consumed by her own hunger for more. He silenced the phone and pushed it aside. His focus was on the papers in front of him. They were the preliminary sketches for the Vance Foundation's first project, a beautifully designed, sustainable community center in a neighborhood that had been neglected for decades. The passive solar design will reduce energy costs by almost 60%, Liam explained, his voice alive with a passion that had been dormant for too long. And we can use locally sourced, reclaimed materials to build it, creating jobs and minimizing the environmental impact. Eleanor looked at the drawings, then at her son's animated face. This was the man she knew, the builder, the creator, not the diminished figure she had worried about for so long. The money, which she had viewed as a monstrous complication, was being transformed before her eyes into something good, something real, something that would last. "It's wonderful, Liam," she said softly. "It's a beautiful foundation to build on." He knew she wasn't just talking about the building. She was talking about his life. The demolition was over. The site was cleared. It was time to start building again. 3 months later, the dust had settled, leaving a landscape dramatically altered. The divorce was finalized in a quiet, unceremonious court proceeding. In the end, there was very little to divide. The grand house, which Clara had fought so hard to keep, was so heavily mortgaged by her father that the equity was almost zero. Faced with shouldering the massive monthly payments himself, Marcus had forced a sale, taking a loss just to be rid of the monument to his daughter's folly. Clara, stripped of her expected fortune and cut off from her father's now constricted purse strings, found her life contracting with breathtaking speed. The crimson sports car was repossessed. The designer clothes were consigned for a fraction of their purchase price to pay legal bills, and the first month's rent on a small, one-bedroom apartment in a part of town she used to joke about. One afternoon, Liam was driving through his old neighborhood to retrieve the last of his professional books from the sold house when he saw her. She was wrestling with a collapsing cardboard box on the sidewalk, her face a mask of frustration, her expensive-looking heels ill-suited for the task of moving. A gust of wind caught her hair, whipping it across her face. She looked not just diminished but lost, adrift in a sea of mundane realities she had spent her entire life paying to avoid. Their eyes met for a brief second across the street. He saw a flash of humiliation in her gaze, quickly replaced by the familiar spark of anger. She turned away sharply. Liam didn't feel triumph. He didn't feel pity. He felt nothing at all. She was a stranger, a ghost from a life that was no longer his. He drove on without looking back. His own life, in contrast, was expanding. The Vance Design Group was officially open for business. His office wasn't a sleek, glass and chrome box in a downtown skyscraper. It was a renovated loft space in an old brick warehouse, with high ceilings, exposed beams, and huge windows that flooded the space with natural light. It was filled with drafting tables, architectural models, and the excited chatter of the two young, brilliant graduate architects he had hired. The Vance Foundation was his first and primary client. The community center project was underway, and it was already generating positive buzz in the local media. It was praised for its innovative, eco-friendly design and its community-first approach. Liam was back in his element, not just designing, but leading, creating, and building something with purpose. He had reconnected with old colleagues who now saw him not as the man who was laid off, but as a visionary with the resources to bring his ideas to life. The respect he now commanded was different from before. It wasn't just for his talent, it was for his integrity. The story of his divorce, though never publicly detailed, had circulated in whispers through their professional circles. He had faced down the city's most powerful corporate titan and won, not with brute force, but with quiet, unshakable principle. One evening, he stood on the second floor of his new office, looking out over the city as the sun began to set. His mother was with him. She had come to see the finished space. "You seem happy, Liam," Eleanor said, standing beside him. "I am," he replied, and the simplicity of the statement felt profound. I'd forgotten what it felt like. For a long time, I was trying to build a life on a faulty foundation. I kept trying to shore it up, to fix the cracks, not realizing the ground underneath was poison. He turned from the window and looked at the bustling studio behind him. "This," he said, gesturing to the models, the plans, the people. "This is a solid foundation. This is real." Eleanor smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Your father would have been so proud of you, not for the money, but for this, for the man you've become." The past was a blueprint he had filed away. The future was an open space, waiting to be designed. And for the first time in a very long time, Liam Vance felt like he was finally home. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the construction site. It was a hive of controlled and purposeful activity. The skeleton of the community center was rising from the ground, a framework of steel and sustainable timber that already hinted at the elegance of the final design. Liam stood on a small rise overlooking the site, a roll of blueprints tucked under his arm. The air smelled of sawdust, fresh earth, and possibility. He felt a profound sense of peace. The tumultuous, emotional storm of the past year had passed, leaving behind a clean, clear sky. He rarely thought of Clara anymore. When he did, it was with a distant, clinical detachment. Her downfall had not brought him joy, only a quiet confirmation of a sad truth. Some structures are simply not built to last. They are designed for appearance, not for strength, and will inevitably collapse under the first real pressure. Their marriage had been a house of cards, and the lottery win had been not a hurricane, but a simple gust of wind, just enough to reveal its inherent fragility. His victory, he now understood, had not been in the mediation room. It was not in the acquisition of wealth or the punishment of his ex-wife. His victory was here, on this patch of dirt, watching something beautiful and useful grow from nothing. It was in the reclaiming of his own name, his own purpose. The money, his mother's money, was merely a tool, like a hammer or a saw. It was the architect's vision that gave it meaning. He thought about the nature of worth. Marcus and Clara had believed worth was something you acquired, something you displayed. A stock portfolio, a designer watch, a powerful last name. They spent their lives in a frantic race to accumulate these external symbols, terrified of being seen as having less. But they were wrong. True worth was not external. It was internal. It was the structural integrity of your character. It was the foundation of principles you built your life upon, the quiet, unseen framework that held you up when the world tried to tear you down. Liam had been humiliated, dismissed, and deemed worthless by their standards. But his foundation had held. Clara, for all her outward confidence and inherited status, had a foundation of sand, and it had washed away at the first sign of a changing tide. He unrolled the blueprints, the paper crinkling in the quiet air. He was looking at the plans for the rooftop garden, a space designed for community gatherings and quiet contemplation. He smiled. He was no longer just an architect of buildings. He was the architect of his own life, and the design was finally his own. He was building on solid ground. And so, a story of betrayal and greed ends with a quiet lesson in foundations. What we build our lives on matters more than the decorations we hang on the walls. Integrity, patience, and self-respect are the steel beams and reinforced concrete of a life well lived. Arrogance and avarice are just plasterboard, destined to crumble. What do you think about Liam's journey? Was his quiet, strategic response the ultimate form of justice, or could he have found a different path? We would be fascinated to read your thoughts and opinions in the comments section below. Your perspectives are what make these stories come alive. Thank you for joining us today. If this story of quiet vindication resonated with you, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing for more content that explores the complexities of human nature. Until next time, remember to check your own foundations. They are the most important project you will ever build.